When the world's fastest shutter tried to capture him, the camera returned a photo of its own reflection. He had never been there, yet he never left. I stared at that impossible JPG until my eyes ached, and still, the timestamp insisted we shot it at 1/8,000th of a second. That's faster than a hummingbird's wing beat, and somehow it missed a man standing dead center. The night we caught the glitch started like any stakeout in Shibuya, only colder. Our field tech Kenji had mounted the Phantom on a traffic railing, aiming toward the scramble, where rumors said the subject crossed every Tuesday at 11:57. We laughed about ghost stories while sipping vending machine coffee, convinced the only spirits here were the ones labeled boss. Then, the playback stuttered. Frame 0 showed a tall figure in a charcoal coat, collar up, faceless under the crossing lights. Frame 1 replaced him with nothing. Not empty space, but an absence so pure the pixels folded back on themselves, revealing the camera's own lens like a black iris staring straight at us. I felt the coffee turn to ice in my stomach. Kenji rewound it 10 times, then 100, swearing louder each loop. The audio track was weirder, a hush so total it erased the city's roar, as if the crossing itself forgot how to sound. Like the world paused to let him step out of existence. We called the rest of the crew on walkie. Nobody believed us until we uploaded the clip. Within minutes, 3 separate witnesses phoned in. First was Aiko, a street drummer whose sticks froze mid-beat. She said the man looked straight at her, tipped an imaginary hat, and then... the crowd surged forward as though he'd never blocked their path. Next came a bike courier whose GoPro captured the same impossible skip. He emailed us before dawn, subject line reading simply, "Did you see it too?" By sunrise, we had 8 clips from 8 angles, every single one identical. Each ended with the same mirrored lens flare, like the universe winking. We built a timeline down to the millisecond, convinced we'd find a dropped frame, a compression error, anything. Nothing. Instead, we uncovered a pattern. The figure arrived precisely when the local clocks ticked from 11:56 to 57 and vanished before the next second could register. Try explaining that to your insurance company. That afternoon, a courier delivered a plain white envelope to our hotel room. No return address, just our production code name scrawled in pencil. Inside was a cheap prepaid phone already vibrating. I flipped it open, thumb hovering, when the screen lit up with one sentence. "If you see me, stop looking." The letters flickered, then rearranged into a timestamp. Tonight, 23:56. Same crossing. Kenji wanted to smash the phone, afraid it was bait. I admit my pulse hammered loud enough to hear. But curiosity is a louder drum. We packed fresh batteries, 2 extra phantoms, and a parabolic mic that could hear a moth sneeze. By dusk, we were back on the curb, rain starting again, neon bleeding across puddles like spilled ink. The crossing lights cycled from green to red, counting down the seconds we had left to decide. I kept thinking about that mirrored frame, how a camera bent on recording everything could only see itself when he passed. It felt like a dare written in light. Prove I exist, and in that instant, I disappear. Catch me, and I'll take the world with me. The minute hand on my watch slid toward 56, and the air tasted metallic, like the city itself was holding its breath. Right then, my earpiece crackled, not with static, but with silence so loud it rang. I glanced at the countdown overlay ticking on the monitor. 10, 9, 8. Somewhere behind us, a single pair of footsteps started walking out of sync with the crowd. I couldn't tell if the sound came from the street or from inside my own head. At 3 seconds, the rain stopped mid-fall, droplets hanging like glass beads. 2 seconds, and every billboard flickered to black. 1 second, and every camera we owned showed the same impossible image, our own lenses staring back, perfectly still. Then, the timestamp rolled to 57, and the screen went white. Not blank, white, like overexposed lightning. When the image cleared, the crossing was empty, rain falling again, neon buzzing, crowds flowing as if nothing had paused. Every camera file ended at that 1/8,000th slice of time. Except for one thing. The white frame wasn't empty. In the center, so faint it might have been static, was the outline of a door. No handle, no depth, just an invitation cut out of light. I zoomed until pixels broke into rainbow noise, and that's when the phone buzzed again. This time the message was shorter, colder, and it chilled me more than the Tokyo rain ever could. You looked. Now follow. The timestamp underneath read 0001, tomorrow. I felt the sidewalk tilt under my boots. We had 24 hours before the next Vanish, maybe less, and somewhere between the seconds, he was already walking toward whatever that door opened onto. I pocketed the phone, heart hammering like a broken shutter, and wondered what happens when the man who cancels cameras decides it's time to cancel the people watching them. Because if we show up tomorrow night, and we will, there's a chance the next frame won't just erase him. It might erase us, too. I couldn't sleep on the flight to Prague, not with that hotel room glitch still burning behind my eyes. Every time the cabin lights dimmed, the door-shaped void replayed itself, swallowing the man who wasn't really a man anymore. So when the wheels touched down in a fog that smelled of coal smoke and old film stock, I wasn't surprised to hear the pilot mutter, "Weather's weird today. Cameras on the tower keep going black." I grabbed my bag and stepped into the night like stepping into undeveloped celluloid. I met the archival team at an abandoned film lab in Smykov, the kind of place where daylight seemed embarrassed to enter. Marek, the lead technician, greeted me with hands that trembled around his cigarette. You want to see the reels? We pulled them from a vault sealed since 1979. The labels. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the concrete corridor behind him. They list the same subject every year, dated like clockwork, yet the face is always turned away. Inside the inspection room, the air tasted metallic, as though silver itself had evaporated and settled on our tongues. A flatbed word, feeding dusty 16mm through its gate. The first frame appeared, a street festival in 1972, banners bright as fresh blood, and there, at the edge, the silhouette, trenchcoat collar high, hat brim low, already walking out of shot. Marek paused, reversed, advanced again. The same impossible figure, never closer, never farther, a single frame of him per reel. He's like a watermark on memory, Marek whispered, voice cracking. But the real horror lay in what the chemistry told us. Anya, the younger tech, slid a loop across the frame. Look at the silver halide crystals where he passes. They're gone. Not exposed, not fogged. Gone. As if something drank the very photons that should have painted his face. She tapped her pen against the glass, a nervous metronome. Every reel, same pattern. A perfect silhouette of absence. We cued reel after reel. 1975, a metro platform, the figure waiting behind a kiosk. 1978, a snow-drowned park bench, the silhouette feeding birds that refused to land near him. Each time the camera tried to turn, the frame stuttered, skipped, leaving only that turned shoulder, like a man forever apologizing for existing. What if, I said, throat raw, he isn't avoiding the lens? What if the lens is protecting us from seeing him? Marek killed the lights, so only the projection burned. We cross-processed one strip through an electron microscope. Wherever he walked, the gelatin layer is thinner, microscopically gouged, as though reality itself was squeegeed off. He rubbed his temples. The film remembers less each time. I felt the temperature drop, though the old heaters clanged on. Somewhere in the vents, something that wasn't wind moaned. Anya produced a reel marked with a single word, original. This one predates the others by a decade. We think it's the first contact. She loaded it with reverence usually reserved for relics. The countdown leader flickered. 8, 7, 6, then a shot so grainy it felt carved from static. A bare apartment, one window, a wall calendar reading 1969, and in the middle, the silhouette, this time facing the camera. But where the face should be, the emulsion was transparent, a void shaped like a man, eyes 2 pinpricks of absolute black. I leaned closer, breath fogging the glass. The figure raised a hand, not waving, not threatening, more like adjusting an invisible lens. At that exact frame, the sprocket holes warped, as though the celluloid itself winced. The hand blocked the lens, and when it lowered, the apartment was empty. Calendar torn to October, window open onto a city that didn't exist yet. Marek's voice dropped. Every copy we make of this reel degrades the same way. Silver leaches out, leaving a hole you could fall through. He pulled a reel-to-reel audio tape, labeled in hurried Cyrillic. We found a synchronous soundtrack, but listen. He pressed play. At first only crackle, then a single breath, neither inhale nor exhale, just the sound of air remembering it had once been inside lungs. Then silence deeper than any mute button. Anya turned to me, eyes wide. We think the reels are bait. Someone, something, wants us to develop them, to spread the erosion. Every projection widens the hole. The building's power stuttered. Lights blinked. The flatbed slowed, then lurched forward 3 frames on its own. On the screen, the silhouette now stood an inch closer than a moment ago, as if the movie were walking toward the audience. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop the reel. He hears the whir. I dropped it. The screen cracked against the concrete. The projector fan whined higher, a mechanical scream. The silhouette's head tilted, that void face angled upward, not at the camera, but at us, here, now. The silverless outline began to pulse, a heartbeat of missing light. Marek lunged for the power switch, but his hand froze inches away, skin turning gray as old film. Anya screamed, the sound muffled as if recorded on rotten tape. The reel kept feeding, faster now, the frames becoming a blur of dark motion. And through the blur, I swear I saw the silhouette step forward, not in the film, but out of it. One boot already past the gate and into our world. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in blood red. The film snapped, flapping against the take-up reel like a dying bird. Silence. Then the smell of ozone and something older, like a dark room that never dried. When my eyes adjusted, the screen was blank. The silhouette was gone. But the floor in front of the projector was wet with something metallic, and the trail led not toward the door, but into the archive vault. I looked at the remaining reels. Each one now bore a new label, handwritten in fresh ink. Tomorrow. Marek stared at the trail, voice barely a thread. If we follow, we might see his face at last. I swallowed the taste of silver and fear. Or, I said, we might finally understand what happens when the last frame runs out. The vault waited, breathing. Somewhere inside, a projector we never turned on began to whir all by itself. The whirring stopped the moment I stepped past the threshold, as though the film itself had been waiting for a witness. The corridor tasted of iron and static, and the silver footprints ended in a single, perfect circle of shadow that refused to reflect the red emergency glow. I knelt, touched it, and my fingertip came away colder than the vault. Marek stayed outside the ring, breathing hard. Whatever you felt, he muttered, I saw it on your face, and I don't want the echo. He pressed a satellite phone into my palm. It was already warm, already speaking in a voice so thin it could only be a whisper. The coordinates it repeated, 19 degrees south, 67.8 west, were not a place. They were a heartbeat. Bolivia. Salt flats so bright they burn retinas. I laughed without humor. He wants us to meet him under the world's biggest reflector. We flew through the night, chasing dawn across the equator. Every time I blinked, I saw that perfect circle of void on the inside of my eyelids. Marek didn't sleep either. He stared at the drone's live feed, as if expecting the lens to blink back. Somewhere over the Amazon, the signal doubled. A second set of coordinates layered beneath the first, like a ghost track on old tape. I tasted salt already. We landed in Uyuni at the hour when even shadows beg for mercy. The flat stretched white to every horizon, a desert of mirrors. Our guide, old, sun-cracked, hat pulled so low only his lips showed, took one look at the drone feed and stepped back. He carries the night inside, he said, voice shaking like kettle steam. I go no closer than the edge. He left us with a thermos of coca tea and the sound of boots crunching away forever. We launched the drone anyway. Its rotors sliced the silence. Up it went, 300 feet, 500, until the entire white world became a shining plate beneath us. And then we saw him, a solitary figure standing dead center. No vehicle, no footprints leading in or out, just the man and the impossible. His silhouette was so absolute it drank the light, a hole punched through the noon glare. Around him, the salt reflected everything except what stood on it. Merrick zoomed until the drone shuddered. "Look at the shadow," he whispered. I already was. Shadows on salt are faint gray smudges. This thing under the man was pitch, a two-dimensional abyss. It wasn't cast, it was carried. And the worst part? The drone's altimeter insisted the figure was 3 meters tall, even though from our distance he looked normal. Perspective itself had begun to cancel. I felt the satellite phone vibrate. One word pulsed across its cracked display. "Look down!" I glanced at my boots, expecting nothing. Instead, my own shadow had thinned to a thread, then snapped, pooling black as oil. The void was spreading from the center of the flats to us, frame by stolen frame. I could almost hear the sound of light being erased. Marek staggered back, clutching the controller like a crucifix. "He's not just canceling cameras," he stammered. "He's canceling—" He couldn't finish. The drone feed glitched, froze, then rebooted to show the same figure now facing us, head tilted, as if listening through the lens. I swear the distance between him and the drone had halved, though neither had moved. The salt under him remained untouched, but the salt under us began to hiss, crystals fusing into obsidian glass. I raised the satellite phone. The whisper returned, clearer now, the voice unmistakably mine. "Come alone," it said with my own mouth, "and bring the shadow you borrowed." I looked again. My shadow was gone entirely. Above us, the drone's battery icon bled to red. It began descending, not because we told it to, but because something below was pulling it home. The figure lifted an arm. No, not an arm. An absence shaped like one, and pointed directly at the lens. Marek grabbed my sleeve. "We should run," he said, but his voice was already distant, as though spoken through thick glass. I felt my legs moving, yet the salt stayed the same distance away, the figure neither closer nor farther, just waiting. The last frame on the controller showed the drone hovering inches above the void. Its camera turned 180 degrees to stare at us. Then the feed cut to black, not static, not snow. Pure nothing. I dropped the controller. It shattered on the salt, pieces already reflecting nothing. The satellite phone rang once, a sound like a single film frame snapping. I answered without breathing. On the other end, silence stretched long enough for 2 heartbeats. Then came my own voice, but reversed, syllables folding inward. "You have until the last light," it said. "Bring what you stole." The call ended. I looked up. The sun was already kissing the edge of the world, shadows pooling like spilled ink across the flats, every one of them racing toward the center. Marek stepped forward, but I raised a hand. "He's asking for a trade," I whispered. My shadow for whatever truth the lens can't hold. Behind us, the pickup truck's headlights flickered once, then went dark. The guide had taken even the light with him. I took one step onto the obsidian glass. It felt warm, like skin that had never seen daylight. The circle tightened. Salt became mirror, mirror became void. Somewhere between the first footfall and the last breath of daylight, I realized the drone hadn't crashed. It had simply been absorbed, another canceled frame in a reel no one would ever develop. And as the final sliver of sun vanished, the figure began walking toward me, each step erasing the world behind him, leaving nothing for morning to remember. The satellite phone buzzed one last time. I didn't need to look. I already knew the message would be blank, and somehow, that was the most terrifying word of all. Because when the last frame runs out, what's left is the space where the story used to be. The satellite phone kept vibrating against my palm long after the call had ended, as though the blank message was still trying to speak. I stood there, ankle deep in black salt, feeling the world contract around me, like lungs exhaling for the last time. When the darkness became absolute, I did the only thing left. I walked forward, trusting the absence to guide me. I don't know how long it took. Time had already surrendered its passport, but eventually the air warmed just enough to taste metal. A low hum rose, more felt in the teeth than heard. Then, without warning, ground became stairs, and I climbed until a wooden door creaked open in front of me. Reykjavik has never smelled so much like old books and ozone. Inside, the safe house was one room, low-ceilinged, lit by a green banker's lamp that flickered like it was arguing with its own bulb. Shelves sagged under lenses, burnt mirrors, shattered filters, and there, at a workbench, sat Dr. Bryndis Jonsdottir. 87 years of midnight poured into her skin. She raised a hand without looking up. "You're late," she rasped, "but the shadow doesn't care for schedules." I swallowed the question of how she knew I was coming. She answered anyway. "Because 29 years ago, he touched me too." She slid a small, velvet-lined box across the table. Inside rested a disc of fused glass, once the objective lens of a 200-millimeter telescope. Its center had melted into a perfect droplet, as though gravity had been reversed and heat had flowed inward. Not outward, always inward. July 11th, 1993, Svalbard. Total eclipse. She was photographing the corona when something stepped between her and the sun. Not the moon, something smaller. A man-shaped absence. Her telescope fried in the instant. Her film came out blank except for a single silhouette where light had simply refused to exist. "I felt the temperature drop," she said, rubbing the scar on her wrist. Colder than the vacuum we measured in low orbit. Colder than the idea of warmth. She poured coffee thick as motor oil. Steam curled like question marks. For years I convinced myself it was cosmic ray interference, a hallucination brought on by retinal burn. Then the lenses around the world started melting. Always the same hole, always the same shape. She gestured to a wall map peppered with red pins, every observatory that had lost a scope since '93. "He isn't hiding from us," she continued, tapping the fused glass. "He's containing whatever wants to be seen through these eyes of ours." I asked the obvious, stupid question. What wants to be seen? The laugh that escaped her was dry, rusted. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a Polaroid, shaking it like the '90s still lived. Slowly, an image formed, nothing but black, and in the center, a mouth. No face, just lips parted as though mid-scream, carved out of the darkness itself. "The first time," she said, "I thought the mouth was screaming at me. Now I know it was screaming at him." She flipped the photo over. There, in shaky ballpoint, someone had written, "Frame 717, Iceland, 2023. Next week's date." My pulse began sinking with the lamp's flicker. She saw it. "You're already carrying the echo," she murmured. "That blank message you got. Listen." She held the satellite phone to my ear. At first I heard nothing. Then the nothing itself pulsed like a heartbeat made of static. He yanked the phone away, but the rhythm stayed inside my skull. She led me to a narrow cot wedged between filing cabinets. "Sleep if you can," she said. "Dreams are the only place he hasn't learned to walk yet." But even as she spoke, I noticed her blankets were covered in lens caps, dozens of them, all turned outward like tiny shields. Superstition or strategy, who could tell anymore? Hours passed, or minutes wearing hour masks. I drifted until a metallic click snapped me upright. Dr. Jonsdottir stood at the window, a battered Hasselblad aimed at the night. The lens cap was off. "He's early," she whispered. "The eclipse isn't supposed to touch Iceland until tomorrow." Through the viewfinder, the streetlights were already dimming, one by one, as though bulbs were being unscrewed by invisible hands. I joined her, heart-hammering Morse code for run. The camera's shutter clicked. Nothing happened. Click again. Still nothing. Then the film began to advance on its own, whirring like a trapped insect. She pulled the negative strip out, and we watched the frames develop in open air, each one darker than the last, until the final square was absolute black. From inside that black, the mouth had moved closer. Dr. Jonsdottir dropped the strip as if it burned. "He's breaching containment," she said, voice trembling like old glass. "The thing he carries is almost ready to speak." She grabbed a thermos filled not with coffee, but with liquid nitrogen, and poured it over the photographs. They hissed, curled, cracked. The mouth remained, now 3 frames from the edge. We backed away. The safe house lights flickered harder, faster, until they strobbed like a dying heartbeat. I felt the static in my skull synchronize with the lamp, the street, the sky. Then the green bulb burst, showering us in emerald snow. In the darkness, Dr. Jonsdotter pressed something into my hand. A single lens cap, still warm. "Put it over your eye," she hissed. "Don't let it see you seeing." Before I could ask which eye, every pane of glass in the room cracked at once, creating a spider web of fractures too perfect to be accidental. Through the splinters, I glimpsed the alley filling with a darkness thicker than walls, moving toward the door in slow, deliberate steps. The floorboards groaned like ship timbers. Dr. Jonsdotter shoved a reel of undeveloped film into my pocket. "Take this to the old lighthouse at Krata," she said, voice suddenly calm. "The last safe shutter speed is 1 over forever." She pushed me toward a hatch in the ceiling. I hesitated. "What about you?" She smiled, the saddest smile ever curved. "I'm already exposed." As I scrambled up into the freezing attic, the hatch slammed shut behind me. Below, I heard her camera click one last time, followed by a silence heavier than sound. Then, from that silence, something spoke. Not in words, but in the sound of film burning backwards. I crawled toward the roof exit, every splinter under my knees a reminder that time was rewinding itself. The reel in my pocket was warm, pulsing like a second heart. When I reached the trapdoor to the street, I paused, because the heartbeat wasn't just the film. It was coming from the lens cap still clenched in my other hand. And it was growing hotter, as if something on the other side were breathing through it. I pulled the cap closer, and for one impossible moment, I felt the edge of a mouth pressed against the plastic, whispering numbers that tasted like burnt silver. The final one was 0. 0 frames left. Then the rooftop door slammed shut on its own, and I was left alone with the reel, the cap, and the growing certainty that the next eclipse would not be in the sky. It would be behind my eyes. The air inside the observatory smelled of rusted copper and the desert's cold breath, a taste that coated my tongue like old blood. The moment I stepped across the threshold, the door behind me slammed, echoing through the dome like a judge's gavel. I swallowed hard, the last number, 0, still burning behind my eyes, like a dying ember. "Okay," I told myself. "You wanted answers, and this is where answers hide." My boots crunched over shattered lenses and forgotten cables. Somewhere above, the giant telescope hung like a broken neck, its mirrors staring blindly into nothing. Then I heard it, the low, mechanical grinding that wasn't gears, but something breathing. That sound was coming from the control room, a narrow booth tucked beneath the spiral stairs. I crept closer, each footstep quieter than the last, until the door yawned open before I could reach the handle. It wanted me inside. The monitors inside glowed pure black, as if someone had unplugged the concept of light itself. I leaned over the console, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my teeth. The screens flickered once, and I saw the silhouette again, tall, edgeless, like a hole cut from the universe. He stood on the catwalk above the telescope mount, hands still, faceless. I pressed record on the handheld camera I'd brought, but the viewfinder stayed dark, the battery indicator blinking 0, 0, 0. The silhouette turned toward me, slowly, like a sundial tracking a dying sun. I felt the temperature drop until my breath came out in silver threads. The monitors pulsed again, and this time the void inside them flexed, revealing a single living eye. It wasn't an eye made of flesh or light. It was an absence, a pupil that ate whatever looked at it. I stumbled back, knocking over a rolling chair that spun and squealed like a wounded animal. The camera operator I'd brought, Javi, burst through the opposite door, lens raised like a shield. "Got him framed," he hissed, triumph in his voice. Then his scream cut every other sound in half. I spun toward him. Javi's camera was pointed at his own reflection in a cracked mirror, bolted to the wall. The eye from the monitor wasn't just on the screens anymore. It had crawled into the glass. Javi's face rippled, features melting like wax too close to flame. His mouth opened, but instead of words, a low, electronic whine poured out. 0 hertz, 0 hope. I lunged, grabbing the shoulder strap of his rig, trying to pull him away. The strap burned my palm like dry ice. He thrashed, but the more he moved, the faster the dissolution went. In 3 heartbeats, his reflection was only a dark outline, a negative space shaped like a man. Then even the outline collapsed into the mirror. The monitors blinked once more, and the silhouette above us lifted an arm. The gesture felt like a conductor cueing an orchestra of silence. Every light inside the observatory dimmed until only the eye and the monitors remained. Growing larger, hungrier, I felt my own reflection tug at the edges of my vision, as if the mirror behind me had grown teeth. My skin prickled with static. The hair on my arms stood straight, pointing toward the void like iron filings near a magnet. The absurd thought hit me that all my footage would come back blank, every frame devoured before it was even exposed. A metallic clatter echoed from the dome's apex. The great telescope began to rotate by itself, gears grinding, lenses aligning with something that wasn't a star. The eye in the monitors rolled, fixing on me. I felt the pupils of my own eyes dilate beyond anatomy, stretching until I could feel the edges of the room inside my skull. The air tasted of burnt silver again, the same flavor from the rooftop. I understood, suddenly and horribly, that the eclipse wasn't coming from above. Clear's throat. It was being projected outward, from inside whatever stood on that catwalk, from inside the monitors, from inside me. My knees buckled. The floor felt soft, as if the concrete had turned to exposed film emulsion. Javi's empty camera rig clattered to the ground, lens shattered. Where the glass had been, only a perfect circle of darkness remained, smooth as obsidian. I stared into that circle and saw the silhouette again, but now it was closer, just on the other side of the glass. Hand reaching out, not toward me, but toward the recorder still clipped at my hip. The red tally light blinked once, then twice. Then it stayed on. I hadn't pressed record, I was sure I hadn't, but the device was rolling, capturing silence so loud it felt like a roar. The eye on every monitor turned toward the lens, widening, dilating, as if it recognized itself. My thumb hovered over the stop button, but the silhouette tilted its head, and I swear I heard a voice, not through ears, but through marrow. It said a single word that tasted like burnt silver and midnight frost. Proceed. The tally light flared crimson, brighter than any bulb in the dome. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. All I could do was watch the darkness lean in, ready for its close-up. And then the monitors went black, not off, not broken, black, like velvet over the eyes. The silence pressed inward until even my heartbeat disappeared. I felt the camera's weight shift, lighter, as if the footage itself was already gone. Somewhere in that black, the silhouette exhaled, and I realized the next sound wouldn't be recorded. It would be lived. The monitors never came back. I sat in that studio chair until the leather stuck to my skin, waiting for the tally light to blink, for the ghost of the feed to resurrect. Nothing. Just the smell of hot circuitry and the taste of copper on my tongue. I had no footage, no proof, only the echo of a silhouette that swallowed lenses. 3 months crawled by on hands and knees. I stopped checking email, stopped answering calls. Every knock on the door felt like the end of the world arriving with a warrant. Then, on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and asphalt, the envelope arrived. No return address, no postage. Just my name written in the same slanted hand that had once labeled a reel. Do not develop. My pulse kicked like a bad starter. Inside, one photograph, matte finish, desert bleeding into sky. Flip it over. The warning again, smaller, like a breath. If you ever develop this, look away. Too late. I was already staring. The silhouette stood on cracked salt flats, horizon bending behind him like a pulled bow. He held a camera, my camera, the same one that went dark, pointed straight at the lens, straight at me. No face, just absence-wearing twilight. I should have burned it. Instead, I drove west through 3 states and every regret I ever owned. The desert greeted me with furnace breath and a silence so complete I could hear the blood arguing in my ears. Mile markers counted backward from whatever number hope used to be. Somewhere past midnight, the road surrendered to dirt. and the dirt to nothing. The camera weighed heavier with each step. Not metaphor, actual grams added like guilt. I found the spot by triangulating shadows. 2 scrub pines, 1 rusted oil drum, the exact negative space of the photograph. Salt crust crunched like broken glass. My breath fogged, though the thermometer swore it was 95. Something was watching, but everything was. I lifted the camera, same angle, same frame. Click. Nothing happened. No whir, no flash. Just the soft mechanical sigh of a shutter opening onto darkness. Then the viewfinder brightened, not with light, but with absence. A perfect black rectangle where the silhouette should be. And then it moved. The absence stepped aside, leaving a hole shaped like a man. The hole looked back at me. My heartbeat slowed, synchronized with something vast and patient. I realized the camera wasn't capturing. It was inviting. Every frame I'd ever shot had been a door, and now the doors were opening from the other side. The silhouette raised its invisible hand, beckoning. Not menace, just inevitability. A career of chasing shadows had taught me shadows don't run. They wait. I thought of all the footage I'd lost, the faces erased, the stories unborn. They weren't gone. They were here, standing beside him, waiting for their close-up. The desert wind carried whispers of every lens I'd ever cracked, every sensor I'd fried trying to cage light. Light doesn't want cages. It wants witnesses. I lowered my camera. The gesture felt like laying down a weapon I'd never known I carried. The silhouettes didn't advance. They just breathed, a collective inhale that tasted like static and endings. My own reflection in the lens looked older, thinner, as if the film had been eating me frame by frame since the first test shot. Maybe it had. The heartbeat started soft, distant, like someone running upstairs in a house you've already left. But it grew, filling the desert until every grain of salt vibrated. Louder. Mine, yours, ours. The photograph fluttered from my fingers, landing face down like surrender. On the back, new words bloomed in developing fluid brown. Thank you for looking away. I did not pick it up. I turned instead, walking back along the line of my own footprints already filling with fresh crust. Each step erased the last. Behind me, the silhouettes dissolved into evening, not fading, but folding. Paper dolls returning to flatness. The camera grew lighter, then weightless, then memory. Somewhere, monitors flickered to life, showing only the quiet desert, empty and endless. At the edge of the flats, I found the road again, or it found me. Engine turned, headlights painted tunnels. The radio crackled, then cleared. Just heartbeat, steady, unhurried, keeping time with the odometer. I drove east toward dawn that had already happened somewhere else. No footage, no proof, only the echo of a promise kept. And in the rear view, the silhouette lifted one hand in farewell, already too far to see. The heartbeat slows now, matching yours exactly. You can feel it, can't you? Thump, thump. The sound of a stereo ending and beginning in the same breath. I never developed the photograph. I never needed to. The image developed me. Somewhere, a red tally light still glows, waiting for the next fool brave enough to look into the lens instead of through it. And if you ever find that envelope, remember, the night keeps what the camera can't hold. The heartbeat fades, but it never stops.